Welcome to the lead service line replacement plan class. We really appreciate you guys coming today. I know there's a lot going on with the service line inventory requirements and the new lead service line. Today, we're going to be working with Bruce King came to us or working with us to talk about the lead service line replacement plans and the direction that they look like that you'll be going into the future. Welcome, thank you, and Bruce, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you to Vermont Rural Water Association for letting us offer this training opportunity to anyone who's interested about the lead service line replacement plan and how Vermont is going to implement that part of the lead and copper rule revisions. I'm Bruce King. I'm the Sustainable Infrastructure Section Supervisor in the Drinking Water and Groundwater Protection Division. My section is primarily responsible for implementing the service line inventory and replacement plan portions of the lead and copper rule revisions. And then in the future, we'll probably have a large role to play in any replacement projects that come out of the inventories as they're done. And then we also have a list of contacts on the division website if you need to reach out to anyone at any time. And the website is right here, dec.vermont.gov/water. Then you can find the link on that website. I'll also highlight if you have any questions after this training about service line inventories or replacement plans, we have a organizational email at anr.sli@vermont.gov. So if somebody's out of the office, you can get a little bit of a quicker response. We typically respond to emails between 1 to 3 days if you have any specific questions about how to implement these rules. So I'll go on to the next slide here, which just discusses an overview of what we'll kind of have a conversation about in the next hour. And I'll go over what is the lead and copper rule revisions, what strategies Vermont DEC is using to assist water systems meeting these rules. I'll briefly refamiliarize you with service line inventories, but there's a much more in-depth class offered by Vermont Rural Water Association if you want to take that. And they actually have 2 courses about service line inventories if you're interested. And then we'll really get into the main part of this training, which is about the lead service line replacement plan, the template that Vermont is using, and what the state expects to be in that template. And then finally, we'll finish it up with a few quick tips about how to submit a replacement plan on ANR Online, which is our online paperwork submission website. And then if you have any questions, there'll be more time at the end to answer any questions. Okay, so let's start with the lead and copper rule revisions and the future improvements, the LCRI. Just a background of the timeline that we've had in the past few years. In 2020, the federal government released a final notice that the lead and copper rule revisions would be published. And then early in 2021, the Biden-Harris administration froze all regulations, not just environmental or public health regulations. They froze all regulations that were pending across the federal government, which is a typical move that new administrations do as our presidential cycles through. So they reviewed that for a majority of 2021, and then they announced in December that the LCRR was going to be released and it would be effective. And it was kind of like on the books and implemented and enforceable. Not to make things any more simpler, in 2022, the EPA announced that there'd be a future rule called the Lead and Copper Rule Improvements, or LCRI, that might amend some of the things that were in the LCRR. We don't know when that LCRI will be released, but we think it will be soon. We don't know what specific changes will be in the LCRI, but the EPA has communicated with states and other stakeholders that they do not intend to change the inventory requirement or the replacement plan requirement that we're talking about today. So those requirements are expected to stay the same in any future LCRI, any improvements to the lead and copper rule. So how does that affect Vermont? By October 16th, 2024, which we're coming up almost on 12 months to go, every community and non-transient, non-community water system will need to complete a service line inventory and a lead service line replacement plan if applicable. And we're talking about that lead service line replacement plan today. Across Vermont, there's about 660 systems that need to do that. And we've just breached 100 water systems that have completed their service line inventory in the state of Vermont. So we're making good progress on that. So we'll focus on the replacement plan. More information about the requirements for the inventory are available on our webpage and also in other trainings. We do have strategies to help water systems do this. I'll go over them briefly here. For systems that serve more than 1,000 people and have more than 250 service connections, those water systems are eligible for loans to either pay their in-house staff or hire a consultant or a contractor to complete the inventory for them. These loans are forgivable for the first $100,000, and then above $100,000, there's a lower 0% interest rate. And then additionally, depending on the disadvantaged community status of the water system, there might be more opportunities for forgiveness. If you want more information about what your water system is eligible for, you can look in the intended use plan that DEC put out last year, or you can contact a project developer at the Water Investment Division to help you with organizing that. The second strategy we have, DEC staff going out to assist water systems directly with their inventories. We started with schools and daycares in the NTNC world, and now we're moving on to nonprofit and government NTNCs. And then finally, our third strategy to help water systems is with contracted support. We've hired 4 contractors to assist water systems throughout the state. These contracts are funded and managed by DEC. There's no financial contribution required by water systems. They do have to apply for the assistance, and that information went out a few months ago. And we have over 160 water systems signed up for that, but we can take on more. So if your water system is not a nonprofit educational NTNC, or you serve 1,000 people or less, then you can apply for this type of assistance, and we'll assign you a contractor once they have capacity to do so. We've already assigned 60 water systems to contractors in the past month, and we're working to assign more as contractors start working across the state to help water systems with developing their inventories and then also their replacement plans if they need to do a replacement plan. So let's go back to some fundamentals about what a service line is. So the EPA defines a service line as the pipe connecting the water main to the interior plumbing in the building. And that is typically in a community water system, the large water main, a connector, sometimes called a gooseneck or a pigtail. And then the service line is after the connector and then goes into the premise plumbing or the internal plumbing and ends at either a meter box or an isolation valve. The service line can be either completely owned by the water system, completely owned by the property owner, or ownership can be split, sometimes at the property line and at a curb stop or whatever that specific agreement is between the two parties. In EPA definitions, the connector or the gooseneck is not considered part of the service. So that's some basic terminology about service line when we're talking about the LCRR. And the other thing that I wanted to briefly cover as well is service line inventories. And this is a big picture view at the service line inventory for each property that is served by a water system. This is the type of information that is collected on a service line inventory from a unique identifier about what property is being inventoried and the supporting details for it. You can provide information about the water main, provide information about the system-owned portion of the service line, and then also the customer-owned portion of the service line. And then there's also entries for information or details about the building itself. The items that are marked in red or with the asterisks on your screen are the required details that need to be included in a service line inventory. And then the items marked without an asterisk or in the black text are optional details that a water system can catalog as a good asset management technique to put in their inventory, which can help for other tasks in the future. The two specific properties of a service line are the system-owned service line material, which is marked with a caret here, and then also the customer-owned portion of the service line material marked with the caret here. What material your service line is made out of is what drives the need to have a lead service line replacement plan. So although more data is collected in the inventory, it's those two specific parts of the inventory that may trigger a water system needing to develop the replacement plan. And what are those types of materials that might trigger the need for a plan and a notification to the homeowner that they might have a service line that can cause a public health risk? There are three different types of lines. One is that the building system may receive water through a confirmed lead service line. That means either the system-owned or the customer-owned portion of the service line is made out of lead. It's been confirmed that that material is actually lead. The other trigger could be that the part of the service line is galvanized, requiring replacement. Galvanized pipe, through its chemical properties, can build up a scale if it is downstream of a lead pipe. And in some instances, it can be just as bad as having a lead pipe serving your line. So the EPA has identified galvanized requiring replacement service lines as also needing replacement and notification to the property owner or who occupies the house that they have an elevated lead health risk. And then finally, the third type of service line that drives these additional requirements is a lead status unknown service line. So through a records review, through visual inspection, or other types of techniques, it's just not known in the initial inventory what is the lead status of the service line that's buried under the ground. We don't know if it's lead. We don't know if it's galvanized requiring replacement. We don't know that it's non-lead. And if it is unknown, there is a potential health risk. So the replacement plan is required, and also a notification to the customers that are affected by those lines. And that's what's on the bottom of the slide here, saying that if a customer is served by any of these three types of lines, the water system has to notify them within 30 days, and then also annually, reminding them that the service line is providing water to the property. And then also the water system needs to develop a lead service line replacement plan for the water system. So first, I'll briefly talk about what that notification includes 30 days after the initial service line inventory is accepted by DEC. Initially, you have to provide that notice within 30 days, and then annually. And then if there's any new customers coming online or starting new service at one of these service lines, the water system is required to also provide that information at the time that the service is started. That notice needs to provide information about the service line material, saying we know that it's lead, we know that it's galvanized required replacement, or we don't know what it is. So that needs to be in the notice specifically for that property address. There also needs to be information about the negative health effects of lead, which is pretty common. It's been out there for a few years about how it can potentially affect intelligence and those that are pregnant or who may become pregnant. So there's a set language about that. The notice also needs to include steps that the customer can take to reduce their exposure of lead, such as flushing procedures, using a filter that is NSF approved. That also needs to be included in the notice. And then finally, the notice also needs to include opportunities for either service line replacement or opportunities to verify what the material is. So if the service line is made out of lead, or it's galvanized requiring replacement because it has a lot of lead scale built into it, the water system needs to provide notice annually saying there are opportunities to replace this line. Call this number, visit this website. Let's set up a replacement project to get that lead line out of there. If the material is unknown, and then the water system has to provide opportunities for the customer to engage in an opportunity to verify what the material is for that service line. And that could be call this number to schedule a technician to come look at the service line as it enters your home, and other opportunities that might be more specific to that service line. So that information needs to be provided in the notice as well. DEC has developed a form for water systems to use that has a template for what this notice looks like. as well as a certification form to provide to DEC by July 1st that they provided the proper notifications to affected customers annually. And we provide this form to water systems as they complete their inventory and triggered this need to have this notice. Okay, so that's the notification that's required to affected customers. Now I'll talk about the replacement plan, which is the second requirement if you have one of these service lines in your water system. And it's the minimum is one lead service line in the water system. So if your water system has at least one galvanized or one galvanized requiring replacement or one lead service line or one unknown material line, then this entire replacement plan needs to be completed for the water system. It doesn't matter if you've got 10, 15, 100, it's at least one of those trouble service lines that the replacement plan is triggered and needs to be completed. So the replacement plan is spelled out in the lead and copper rule revisions, and it requires 7 different sections of the plan, which are spelled out here. I'll go into depth a little bit about each one on the next few slides. So the first strategy is not even about replacing service lines. It's about identifying those lines that are still unknown based on your initial records review or your initial outreach to customers trying to knock on doors, get in the basements, the crawl spaces, the utility rooms to figure out what is a line as it comes into the building. And there's a few different strategies that a water system can select in our lead service line replacement plan template of what the water system intends to do to identify what these unknown lines are. And you'll see them on the screen here, and I'll talk a little bit more about each one of what they are. But first, I'll talk about why it's not the best to default to unknowns. And that's because unknowns, of course, trigger the notification, they trigger the replacement plan, and there's definitely opportunities available right now through assistance through DEC to identify what these unknowns are. But we know that they are going to come up, and there is a plan to how to address them. But unknowns are a big question mark. A portion of the lead and copper rule revisions is that there are replacement service line replacement goals. And if a water system digs up a service line, trying to replace it, trying to meet their lead service line goal, and they dig it up and it turns out to be plastic or copper, that unknown, which is now revealed to be copper or plastic, will not count as credit towards the replacement goal. So it's really in a water system's best interest during this initial service line inventory work over the next year and a half to identify what these unknowns are through good records reviews and visual inspections on the property, on the homeowner-owned side of the service line. Another opportunity that water systems can use to identify an unknown material is noting the installation year of the service line. If there's a record available that shows that after a certain year, this service line was put in, then that can be used as justification to say that this line is non-lead. It's not specifically known as copper or PVC, but it is non-lead. If you can identify that the service line was installed after Vermont's enforcement of the lead materials ban in July 1989. So that's another way that we can help get these inventories a little bit more accurate. Water systems do have opportunities to start digging into unknowns after their initial service line inventory. So there are ways to do that, and that's what the strategies are identified in this plan. And there's also money available through our intended use plan using drinking water state revolving funds in this year's IUP to figure out what these unknowns are. So one way you can look into unknowns is the water quality sampling. It could be used to identify unknown lines, and it's more like a positive. Like if you get a water quality sample back that shows that there's lead in the line, that proves that it could be a lead line or it needs a further investigation. Water quality sampling isn't as good as taking a service line out of the running, because there's just too much risk or too much chance that you might miss where the service line actually is. And also, corrosion control may mask the presence of lead in the service line, which means the corrosion control is effective and it's working, but it also means that you may not be able to identify a service line through water quality sampling. So it's most helpful to identify a line that is lead. This is a system-by-system approach. Service lines are different sizes and at different locations, and come in different specifications based on each water system. But it is an opportunity or strategy that you can use to identify unknown service line materials. There's 3 different types of sampling techniques, and I'll just go over what these are if a water system decides they want to use this as a strategy. So the first one is called a targeted service line sampling. This is taking one sample, and the way that the sample is taken is by calculating what the internal premise plumbing volume is, doing some calculations about diameters of pipe, length of pipe, and then after that volume is figured out, the tap is opened somewhere inside the building, the water is flushed out, and then the sample is captured with the best guess that this water started off in the service line, and now it's moved through the plumbing, and now I'm capturing it in the sample bottle. And in this example here, the white dotted line circle is that sample that is moving through the pipe, trying to capture it. Some drawbacks to this is that there is additional time that will be taken to measure how big those pipes are, how long they are, to calculate how much volume you need to do that. And that might be a lot of time in somebody's home where you're trying to do this. But it may be enough to capture the sample that you're looking for. So that's called targeted service line sampling. Another type of sampling technique is called flush sampling. And this is, instead of calculating a specific flush time or flush volume for each individual home, the sampling strategy has a set flushing time, which may be the best flushing time for a set of homes in a water system. The drawback to this is that if I let the tap run for 2 minutes in one house, I might still be in the premise plumbing, whereas in another house, I might be right in the sweet spot of the service line, but in another home, I might have flushed the entire service line and I'm now capturing water from the main. So positive is that you don't have to do a lot of calculations and measurements in each home. The drawback is you don't really know where that water is being collected from across every specific property in the service line. So it's a good strategy for an initial screening where you can see what samples come back with elevated lead concentrations, and then maybe you want to focus more on those buildings and prioritize them on identifying unknowns. The third water quality sampling strategy is called sequential sampling, and this is definitely going to provide you the most accurate or the most detailed information about the service line's lead composition. That's because you're taking multiple samples over the entire premise plumbing and service line, filling up a lot of bottles, putting them all in a box and sending them to the laboratory for analysis. So this is very labor intensive. It's definitely takes a lot of time and money to do this, but you will get a more accurate reading for what could possibly be in that service line for that particular property. Again, the drawback for all these water quality sampling is that it's good for identifying if lead is present, but you might miss something if corrosion control is very effective, masking that there is lead in the actual material. And if you get a negative or zero reading of lead, you can't say there's no lead there. You can say that there is a better chance that there's no lead there. You can't rule it out completely. It's better for identifying that there is a presence of lead. So water quality sampling is just one of the strategies that can be identified in the replacement plan. The next strategy that could be identified is excavation itself. So removing the earth and visually looking at what is buried under the ground. This technique should not be used during the initial inventory, which focuses on records reviews and then visual inspections inside buildings in basements or crawl spaces without having to actually move earth. And it is a possible step that water systems can do after the initial inventory. There's two subtypes of strategies for this: mechanical diving or trenching using mechanical equipment, and then also vacuum excavation, or some kind is called potholding, or using a hydrovac. One of the drawbacks of this type of excavation is that if you have the hole open and you identify a lead service line or galvanized requiring replacement, the rule currently requires you to remove that lead service line immediately and replace it with a non-lead line. So if this is a technique that a water system is going to do, they need to be prepared to replace those lines while the hole is open. As we all know, construction activities can be very disruptive to a community or to a homeowner. So this technique should really be thought out and considered with a lot of thought before it is chosen as a potential strategy for identifying unknowns. And then finally, another risk of excavation is that all that mechanical movement causes vibrations, and we know that vibrations around lead service lines or galvanized requiring replacement lines reduce or release the lead scale buildup and actually cause an increase of lead levels to that particular home, because the lead is broken up, the particulates get into the water lines, and then flow into the premise plumbing where the customer is drinking and using the water. So there is a high risk of using excavation, so there really needs to be a plan to replace the lines and have educational outreach to the customers if this is a technique that's going to be used. Okay, moving on to modeling. Modeling techniques, we really don't think will be that viable in Vermont because a lot of our water systems are small. Modeling techniques use machine learning, probabilities, using a lot of data from other homes and buildings in the area to predict what a particular home with similar construction type or construction year in a city may have similar lead service line or a copper line. It's predicting what it thinks that home of a similar build date in that city may have. And so you need a large statistical database, a lot of data points to put that modeling together. And a lot of systems in Vermont just don't have that many connections to make these statistics really worth anything. So that's predictive modeling. Geostatistical modeling takes it a little bit step forward. They're taking this modeling and plugging it into a GIS, kind of a mapping software, and they're saying construction year in this city on First Street or on Main Street, and it just adds a little bit more accuracy and precision based on space and not just build date in a particular community. If a water system is interested in pursuing some of these types of techniques, definitely reach out to the division to discuss if you think it is a good technique that you want to use. But we really only think this will be viable for the larger water systems in Vermont if it is a strategy that will be pursued. Okay, moving on now to emerging and other methods. Emerging and other methods will require DEC review and also our approval if a water system wants to use this as a strategy to identify unknown materials. Some of the emerging methods that are out there are acoustic sensoring. Mueller has a product through Ecologics that uses sound waves to identify material property. And another one that's out there on the market is Swordfish through Electroscan, which uses low voltage conductivity probes, and that's what the image on this slide is, to receive information and make a determination on what the material might be based on its electromagnetic properties. Since these are emerging technologies, there's not a lot of research on them yet. The DC just wants to make sure it's a good fit for that water system before we approve that in your replacement plan. But we're definitely not saying no to it. We need to know more information before we give it the thumbs up. And then finally, the other option that may be chosen as a strategy to identify unknown service line are called other methods. And this could be less technologically based methods more of the people-to-people type of methods, such as public outreach or customer engagement. This could be, for example, if you have your initial service line inventory and you've knocked on doors, you've handed out flyers, but people just aren't opening their homes to let a technician to check out the customer-owned side of the service line, and you just don't know if it's copper, lead, or plastic. This could be another method to try to increase customer engagement. Maybe you want to try more strategies with educational materials. Maybe you need some support with non-English speakers, and that's the type of assistance and outreach that the water system planning to do. So that could be a method that could be used instead of these more technologically based methods that we talked about earlier. And then the final option, of course, is the non-applicable option. We understand that some of these inventories might come back with no unknowns. They might just have lead or galvanized requiring replacement pipes. And if you have no unknowns, then a strategy to identify your unknowns is not applicable. However, if in the future you identify an unknown line, then this portion of the plan would have to be revised. All right, so that is strategies for identifying unknown. We'll move on to the second section of the plan, which is procedures for conducting full lead line replacement. So this is a portion of the plan where the water system will type in what their procedure is for conducting a full lead line replacement project. Because each water system is unique, we don't provide specific procedure for adoption for this. But there are 4 key things that we are looking for when we review replacement plans. The first one is the labor forces will be done by water system staff, or will contractors be hired to do the replacement project? The second is requiring necessary permits. Are there any local municipal permits that need to be acquired? Will a WW permit need to be required? A permit to construct if it's part of a larger drinking water infrastructure project? What types of permits would be required for a replacement project? The third is acquiring property owner permissions. Of course, if it is a customer-owned portion of the service line, what is the water system's procedure for getting that documentation if it is required? And then finally, we're looking for how will the water system update its service line inventory? And this is the who, when, how that would be accomplished. Because inventories are a living document. They're meant to be updated as you discover new information or you replace lines. What is the procedure that the water system will use to do that? And then there's some additional things that are strongly recommended, such as what are the procedure for replacing goosenecks, in addition to full lead line replacement. To talk a little bit more about the differences between full lead line replacement and partial lead line, I have a few slides here that show what those are. When we say full lead lines, some people might visualize I've got the customer and the service line, or the system-owned portion of the service line, they're both lead, and I'm replacing both portions. Yes, that is full lead line replacement, but there are other types of replacements that are considered full lead line replacement under the rule. And an example of that is if the system owns a copper line and then the customer owns the lead line for their portion, and you replace the lead portion of that, that is a full lead service line replacement because you fully removed the lead from the service line. Another thing is you flip that, the system owns lead, the customer has PVC, you remove just the lead, and now that's a full lead line replacement. You don't have to actually remove the entire line if a portion of the line is non-lead. The only thing where this gets a little complicated is when you have galvanized requiring replacement. The line itself is galvanized, but it might have that lead scale built into it. Then you would have to be lead, galvanized, removing both of those. Or if you just have galvanized requiring replacement on one portion of it, that's considered a full lead line replacement. This is important because it meets any replacement goals that are required under the rule, and also federal funds for replacement projects are only eligible for full lead line replacement projects. A partial lead service line replacement is not eligible for federal funds. And on the next slide here, I have some examples of what partial lead service lines would be categorized as. That's when you have lead going into lead and you only replace half of it, or you have unknown going into galvanized requiring replacement and you only replace the galvanized, you still have the unknown portion. Under the rule, these types of replacements where you only remove the orange portion of the line as shown in the table are considered partial lead service line replacements, which do not meet the goals, are not eligible for replacement dollars from federal funds, have a higher risk of lead because that scale is being released. And then additionally, the water system will have to provide filters, either pitcher filters or inline filters to the customers for 6 months, both times. Part of the rule requires water systems to provide that when any lead pipe is replaced on the service line. Okay. Next, moving on to strategies to inform the customers for the lead service line. This is about educating the customers before it happens, whether it's a lead or a partial lead service line replacement project. The strategy can come in a lot of different forms, but what's required to be in that information is flushing procedures, information about and instructions of how to use the filter or point of use device, which the water system is required to provide for 6 months after a replacement project. The water system needs to educate the customer that they may get a follow-up tap sample 3 to 6 months after the replacement to make sure that there's lower levels of lead in their drinking water. And then for partial lead service line projects, the water system is required to notify customers 45 days in advance and offer an opportunity for the customer to also replace their portion of the service line at the same time, which is the most effective way of doing it. So the strategy that needs to be included in the replacement plan is the how this information is going to be provided to the customers. And in the plan, it needs to be selected. You're going to use media outreach, or you're going to use US mail, emails if you have those for your customers. If you select another method that's not one of the pre-populated ones, then you can discuss that with the division. Get approval for that other method if it's not listed there. All right, so moving on to, and then finally some sample materials are available if you want to develop what your outreach letter or notification could look like. There's some free sample materials from the American Water Works Association at this guide that they have at that URL. All right, moving on to section 4. The middle of the plan is the replacement goal rate. I've been mentioning the lead trigger level, which is 10 parts per billion. That's if a water system collects lead samples and they're above 10 ppb. Then there's a requirement that they start a replacement projects across the water system. For systems that serve more than 10,000 people, they have to input a goal rate of what that is. But for most systems in Vermont, they don't have to put in what a goal rate is. They can if they want to. The replacement plan doesn't require that. So that's an option for water systems that are small. They can just say goal not required. Otherwise, the goal replacement rate is described in the regulation. And then moving on to section 5, this is a procedure for customers to flush service line and premise plumbing of particulate lead after a replacement project. DEC has written this procedure for all Vermont water systems, standardizing it across the state. And of course, if possible, this procedure should be provided to customers in advance of the project using that information delivery strategy that was identified in section 3. So that procedure, which is available in the template in our guidance document about replacement plans, is also here on the slide, which describes step by step what the flushing procedure is about turning off the water at the valve, removing any aerators or other types of drinking water devices, making sure there's no filters on those, and then how you run the water through the premise plumbing. Make sure you flush out all lead particles that might have been in the service line or loosened from the service line as a result of a replacement project. And then once that's done, how you turn off those faucets and put the aerators back on. And then there's a recommended procedure that customers repeat this flushing every 2 weeks for 3 months to make sure any settled particles get flushed out of their internal plumbing. And then, of course, following that up with a actual sample 3 to 6 months after the replacement project. All right, moving through the replacement project here, we move on to section 6, which is the prioritization strategy for lead service line replacement. And this is prioritization within a water system. Some water systems might have 2 or 3 lead service lines that need to be replaced if it's a real small system, but some larger systems might have dozens or hundreds that need to be replaced. And DEC is providing a strategy for all water systems to use to help prioritize how to tackle these replacement projects based on limited funding and limited time. We have a short construction season in Vermont to tackle those, so we are affecting known lead service lines and positively affecting disadvantaged customers first over other types of populations or other types of buildings. So it uses a points-based strategy where a known lead service line gets 10 points. A property that serves, such as a school or a daycare, would get 10 points. And based on each particular project, you can gather priority points and then develop a strategy as a water system about what should be tackled first. A few different scenarios here. If you have a service line that provides drinking water to a elementary school, you know that the service line is lead and that elementary school is in a disadvantaged community, that would be 10 plus 10 plus 10. That's 30 points. And that would be a high priority project to make sure we're addressing lead that might affect young age children in a disadvantaged community. And we know that line is made out of lead. In comparison, if you have a known lead line that provides water to an office complex or an office building, that would only score 10 points because there's no disadvantage or highly sensitive customers at that. So looking across all the projects that water system may need to accomplish, they should prioritize the service line to the school versus the service line to an office building. So this is a strategy that is included in Vermont's lead service line replacement plan template. And there's more information about this in our guidance document if you want more scenarios to look into. All right, moving on to section 7, which is about the money, the funding strategy for conducting replacement projects. We've mentioned a little bit throughout the hour that there is federal funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law. That money is available until 2027 and is flowed into the state's drinking water state revolving funds. There's separate pot of money just for lead service line replacement projects. More information about that type of funding and other types of federal funding are at this EPA web site. There's also funding available from the USDA Rural Development Program and other types of sources where you can use federal funds to conduct replacement projects. The plan itself needs to talk about what the water system's strategy is to acquire funds to do this. If you're going to use loans, what type of loans will you be using? Grants, what type of grant program? Will the water system raise rates to generate funds for these projects? Or will they try to get municipal bonds to do that? So that needs to be included about how the funds will be gathered to do replacement projects. And then the second part required under the regulation is for customers who are unable to replace their portion of the service line that they own, what is the water system's plan to assist these customers? Are there perhaps liens or 0% interest loans, any refunds, tax rebates, increase in rates? There are a lot of different strategies to obtain customer acceptance for their portion of the service line. And those strategies are is spelled out in more detail in this American Water Works Association document that's provided on the screen there. If you just search for that phrase, you can also find it. And we also have more information on our webpage to help water systems figure out what these are. When you're talking about funding, each water system has its own capacity for how much financial obligation it can take on, what types of grants and loans they're able to apply for. So because the unique characteristics of each water system, we don't provide a specific strategy to adopt, but we are looking for an answer to those two questions. How will the water system pay for these replacement projects? And how will they accommodate customers that are unable to pay for the portion that they may own? There's many different ways that that can be accomplished. So those are the 7 sections required in the replacement plan as LCRR currently spells it out. Again, just to review, it kind of starts in the beginning is like, what are the unknowns? What do you have that you don't know? And how do you try to propose to identify those unknowns? Going through the replacement kind of project, identifying how you're going to do that with what labor forces, how you're going to let the customers know that this is happening, and then closing out with how do you prioritize which projects come first and how do you pay for those projects. These are the 7 required sections for the replacement plan, and we have different guidance beyond this training on our webpage to help you walk through what we're expecting to fill in the template for these projects. So those templates that I mentioned are available on the division's webpage. If you go to dec.vermont.gov/water and click on the service line inventory widget at the top of the page, that will bring you to the Lead and Copper Rule Revisions webpage, where we have information about replacement plans, as well as inventories if you're still completing your inventory or looking for assistance on your inventory. And there's also other training and guidance documents there. I do encourage folks, if you do have to do a replacement plan, to check out the template, which is a PDF that is fillable and then submittable on A&R Online. And then there's also a companion document called the Guidance on Lead Service Line Replacement Plans, which walks you through each section, just similar to how this training walked through each section. Then that webpage also has information. Oh, I already mentioned these. It also has how-to instructions on how to complete those requirements from the LCRR. And then finally, just some helpful tips about how to submit these documents on A&R Online. There is a button on A&R Online called Form Finder. So if you click that blue button and then start typing in replacement plan, some blue and yellow text will show up saying Lead Service Line Replacement Plan Submission Form. You click on that and it will prompt you on how to upload your PDF Adobe document of the service line replacement plan. And then the additional requirement is that water systems need to submit a cover letter that's signed by a water system representative saying that we agree to implement this plan. And this is what we're submitting. So those are the 2 requirements that need to be accomplished by October 16th of 2024 if a replacement plan is required for that water system. So that's what we wanted to cover in the last hour. A brief understanding of the LCRR, the strategies that our department is using to assist water systems, meeting the inventory and the replacement plan requirements. And then we went really into the 7 sections of the replacement plan and some tips that are available on our website to accomplish this. So I'll pause there and see if there are any other questions that folks may have. If you can't think of them now, you can always email me at that email address on the screen, bruce.king@vermont.gov or anr.sli@vermont.gov. And then my phone number is also there if you want to give me a call.